The UK is currently facing social and political divisions that echo the historical rifts it once created in the Indian subcontinent. This situation underscores how past actions can continue to influence present circumstances in surprising ways. The current divisions within the UK mirror those created by British policies during the partition of India in 1947, highlighting the long-lasting impact of historical decisions on contemporary issues. The British Empire's decision to partition India in 1947 was one of the most significant and disastrous events in 20th century history. As the British prepared to end their colonial rule, they hastily divided the Indian subcontinent into two separate nations, India and Pakistan. This partition was driven by a desire to quickly withdraw from a region fraught with political and social unrest, but it was executed with alarming speed and lack of consideration for its complex demographic and cultural landscape. The partition, planned by Cyril Radcliffe, was based on religious majorities rather than practical geographic or cultural boundaries. Radcliffe, who had little familiarity with Indian affairs and was under immense time pressure, drew borders that split communities that had lived together harmoniously for centuries. This approach led to a catastrophic displacement of approximately 14 to 16 million people. Hindus and Muslims found themselves on opposite sides of new borders, leading to a mass migration that was both chaotic and traumatic. Families were uprooted from their homes, often under harrowing circumstances, and forced to move to territories where their religious group was the majority. The immediate aftermath of the partition was marked by extreme violence and suffering. As people moved across the new borders, they were often subjected to brutal attacks by opposing groups. The violence was especially severe in regions such as Bengal and Punjab. Reports from this period describe horrific scenes, including attacks on trains transporting migrants, with many trains discovered abandoned and filled with the bodies of those who had been killed. The violence was not only physical, but also psychological, as communities that had coexisted for generations turned against each other in a wave of sectarian animosity. Women and children suffered disproportionately, facing abductions, sexual violence, and other forms of brutality. This violence had a profound and lasting impact on the region. The partition created deep-seated mistrust and hostility between India and Pakistan, contributing to ongoing conflicts, such as the protracted Kashmir dispute. The repercussions of these conflicts have continued to shape the political and social landscape of both countries, with periodic episodes of violence and tension rooted in the historical division. The British policy of divide and rule, which had been employed during their colonial rule to manipulate and control various groups, was a significant factor in the lead-up to the partition. By fostering rivalries and deepening sectarian divides, the British created an environment ripe for conflict. This strategy, which aimed to maintain British control over the subcontinent, ultimately backfired. The arbitrary boundaries drawn by Radcliffe and the ensuing violence highlighted the flaws in this approach and its devastating effects on the region's future. The legacy of the partition extends beyond the Indian subcontinent and has had repercussions for the UK itself. The chaotic withdrawal from India led to a significant migration of Pakistanis to Britain. This migration began as a small movement in the late 1940s, but grew significantly during the 1950s and 60s. The UK, in the aftermath of World War II, was rebuilding its economy and needed to address labor shortages. Many Pakistanis, particularly from the Punjab region, moved to Britain seeking better employment opportunities. They settled in various parts of the UK, including regions like Lancashire and Yorkshire, and played a crucial role in rebuilding the nation's economy. These migrants and their descendants have contributed significantly to the UK's cultural and social fabric, creating a multicultural society that reflects the global interconnectedness of the modern world. However, the historical context of their migration, rooted in the legacy of colonial policies and the chaotic partition, adds a layer of complexity to the UK's contemporary social dynamics. Looking back at the historical shifts in the economy, singer and actor Moy Hassan provides a fascinating perspective on how laborers navigated these changes. During a period when the mills, which were once the cornerstone of employment for many, began to close, These workers faced a new and uncertain economic landscape. Faced with job losses, they did not simply wait for new opportunities to come to them. Instead, they actively sought to create their own paths. Using the redundancy checks, financial compensation provided when they lost their jobs, they took a proactive approach. Many of these former mill workers used their severance pay to open small businesses, such as corner stores. These businesses were particularly significant because they catered to the South Asian community's specific grocery needs, a market largely ignored by British supermarkets at that time. This shift was not just about finding new employment. It was a strategic move to fill a market gap that had emerged due to changing economic conditions. This story of migration and adaptation highlights broader issues about the British government's historical approach to its former colonies. The hasty departure from the subcontinent left many consequences unaddressed, and we still see these effects in today's immigration discussions. Under Keir Starmer's current administration, debates around immigration continue to reflect the same challenges that arose from that rapid withdrawal. The policy responses often seem to address immediate issues rather than fostering long-term cohesive societal integration. Initially, Pakistani immigrants were assigned roles that included operating post offices, working in mills, and driving buses. These roles were crucial but limited in scope. Now, generations later, members of these communities find themselves at the heart of immigration debates. These discussions often mirror the short-sighted approaches of the past, focusing on issues like border control and regulation, rather than on creating inclusive policies that recognize and celebrate the diverse contributions of various communities. The UK's approach to immigration requires a significant shift. It is not enough to merely manage the numbers of immigrants. Effective policies should aim to promote integration, respect, and mutual understanding. This involves recognizing the historical context of migration and the social bonds that have developed over time. The demographic landscape of the UK has changed considerably. For example, the most recent census data shows that there are now 3.9 million Muslims living in London alone. This figure represents a substantial increase, with the Muslim population growing from 4.9% to 6.5% over the past decade. This demographic shift is also reflected in the rise of languages such as Urdu and Punjabi, which have become more widely spoken, ranking 5th and 6th in terms of usage in the country. However, the increasing diversity also brings challenges. Many Muslims, including those of Pakistani origin, reside in some of the most economically disadvantaged areas of the UK. This situation contributes to concerns that the UK is experiencing significant social and economic strains. Additionally, there are pressing issues related to radicalization within certain segments of the Pakistani community. Instances of radical behavior and high-profile terror attacks have raised serious questions about national security and community relations. One particularly troubling issue is the existence of Pakistani grooming gangs, which have been involved in systematic child sexual exploitation. These high-profile cases have intensified public and political discussions about race, crime, and immigration, often fueling right-wing movements such as the English Defence League, co-founded by figures like Tommy Robinson. These complex issues underscore the need for a more thoughtful and inclusive approach to immigration policy. Rather than perpetuating cycles of reactionary measures and fragmented policies, there is a pressing need for strategies that address the nuances of post-colonial migration and its impact on both the country and its diverse population. The aim should be to move beyond outdated discourse and create a more cohesive society that acknowledges and respects the diverse backgrounds and contributions of all its members. The debate surrounding child grooming and integration issues in the UK is a complex one. The government's and media's focus on political correctness and historical guilt over past imperialism has led to a tendency to overlook serious issues like child grooming and abuse. This emphasis on tolerance sometimes overshadows the real problems with child protection agencies. As a result, crucial concerns about systematic abuse and exploitation in some communities can be neglected, contributing to a wider problem of Islamophobia and diverting attention from these pressing issues. When Pakistani communities moved into economic centers in the UK, they faced significant challenges. Visible cultural differences and the creation of tightly knit neighborhoods led to social isolation and difficulties in assimilation. These factors have exacerbated integration problems and complicated the balance between preserving cultural identity and fostering national unity. The incorporation of Sharia law into certain local legal practices further highlights the extent of cultural changes and raises questions about the compatibility of different legal systems within the UK. The clash between Islamic principles and Western values has become increasingly evident. This divergence underscores the need for British society to address its evolving cultural and demographic landscape head-on. The presence of Sharia law in some regions reflects a growing gap between legal and cultural norms, raising concerns about how different governance systems can coexist within a single state. These issues are central to ongoing discussions about how to navigate the balance between justice, equality, and cultural diversity. Over the past few decades, conflicts between multicultural policies and the integration of diverse groups have intensified. The UK's colonial history has contributed to these tensions, highlighting the need to manage the complex interplay of culture, identity, and governance. As British society continues to evolve, finding a way to appreciate cultural diversity while maintaining a strong national identity remains crucial. Thank you for joining me in exploring these important topics. Stay tuned for more insights and discussions on how cultural and demographic changes shape our world.